All right, well, thank you all for coming today. I'm super excited to do this because I am very passionate about health and fitness, but I'm more passionate about health and fitness as a preventative health measure. So I'm so excited that you guys were able to come today and to hear this. And for those listening, I'm thankful that you took the time. One of the things I wanted to jump right into is why physical activity is so important for health and well-being. So first of all, if you take a look at this, regular exercise can help reduce the risk of stroke, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, metabolic disorders, cancer, arthritis, brain health, bone health, and mental health. So right there, is that enough motivation to make you think like maybe I should be doing something, right? I mean, any one of these things would be enough motivation, I think, like to say, okay, I probably should get involved in an exercise program of some sort. But every one of these, that's amazing. It just multiplies the reasons why we should be thinking about our activity a little bit more. So if you could do something to reduce your risk of illness or disease, would you? I mean, let's face it, we can't change our genetics. We can't change our family history. But we could make a commitment to ourselves that could benefit us daily and provide longevity, we would, right? I mean, if we could take a pill for it, we'd probably do that. But you would exercise. Because you know all these things, and because you know how it could benefit you personally, you would choose to exercise. I'm going to get back around to this in a minute. One of the biggest reasons why people say that they are not motivated to exercise is X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. We'll get back to that. But I want to go back to why you should do it, not because of all the reasons that it's, preventative health. That's number one. But number two, how it makes you feel. The biggest thing I hear people say to me is that I have no energy. I'm exhausted. I feel tired all the time. I feel like I'm constantly going, but I just don't have any energy. So exercise, there we go. It boosts your energy. How does it do it? It delivers oxygen and nutrients to the tissues and organs, especially your heart and lungs, which actually makes you feel better, makes you function better, and it helps you accomplish more without being fatigued. Exercise also stimulates specific brain chemicals called endorphins. One thing that I noticed is that for me, a lot of times before I start exercising, even though I really love it, a lot of times I think, like, I don't know if I'm that motivated to do it right now. At the end of my workout, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God I did it. And it's because of those endorphins that have kicked in, and I'm feeling really good about it. Those endorphins help you feel happier, more relaxed, and less anxious. You may also feel better about your appearance when you regularly exercise, which can help you increase your self-confidence and your self-esteem. And it's really interesting about that because I have to say, I think a big piece of that too has to do with posture. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about as well. When you exercise, you generally have better posture because you need to have that when you're exercising. So it really does help to kind of boost your confidence and make you feel better. Exercise also promotes better sleep. This is another thing a lot of people tell me is that they just don't sleep at night. And a lot of times they say, I fall asleep quickly, but then I wake up all night long. One thing that exercise does is it actually helps you fall asleep and stay asleep, which is also what helps increase your immunity, reducing your risk of illness and the common cold, allowing you to feel more productive and an increased sense of well-being. Think about that for a second. When you're sick a lot and you're missing work or missing things that you love because you're not feeling well, you just overall start feeling like, I don't feel as good about, my health. I don't feel as energetic. I don't feel like I'm able to participate in life the way that I want to. Your immune system has a lot to do with how you feel about your sense of well-being, which is a really important component of your overall wellness. So how much exercise should I get weekly? The American Heart Association and the Department of Health and Human Services has a guideline set for you. But this could look a little intimidating, although I'm going to kind of break it down a little bit. 150 minutes per week for moderate exercise, that might sound like a lot. 150 minutes a week is 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Okay, so look at that for a second. 30 minutes a day is 2% of your day. Okay, so you might say, well, yeah, but I don't know if I have the stamina for 30 minutes a day. You could also break it down into 3 10-minute sessions per day. And that way you have the stamina to do 10 minutes. You could do it 3 times a day, break it up, and it's moderate exercise. So this is walking. This is not necessarily a really intense workout program. This is just movement that actually gets your heart rate up at a moderate level, which we're going to get to that level as well. There's also 75 minutes of vigorous exercise per week, or a combination of moderate and vigorous activity. I know, so Cheyenne sits behind me, and we talk a lot about her workouts because she goes to CrossFit, which is insane. I don't know if anybody knows anything about CrossFit workouts, but they're highly intense. So the general person that does that, like Cheyenne, she works out 15, 20 minutes at a time, right? Because it's so high, it's such a high intensity. You really can't sustain that for 30 minutes to 45 to 50 minutes. So that's why it is totally different, and it's 75 minutes. Cheyenne, do you mind showing a few moves from your... maybe you could pick like 2 moves that you could show the intensity. Say you have dumbbells in your hands. Oh, you can come up here. I know. She's in the middle of eating. But showing a like a fitness move, maybe like a squat, clean, and press, kind of something like that.
Okay, so like with the movements, we have like a barbells. So it's just like a long pole. You said a clean and press.
Yeah.
So you have it down on the ground, and then you bring it up, and then you come here, and then you press it over your head.
With a barbell, she just said, right? So you can imagine doing that. That's a really intense exercise. You can't do something like that for a long period of time. You can't sustain that kind of movement, right? Do you have another one for us? Maybe some kind of like burpee position or something?
Burpee.
I mean, she just ate.
Yeah, I can do a burpee.
She's got heels on.
That's great. Okay, well, I don't know. All right, I'm going to do it sideways.
Yes, no, that's good. That's good.
So you come down.
All right, look at that. Amazing. But could you imagine doing that for a long period of time? I mean, that's why that's so vigorous. I'm trying to give you an idea of what the difference between moderate movement and very high intensity workout. All right, thank you, Cheyenne. I knew she'd be willing to do it. She's so awesome. So the other one is, a lot of people will say, well, I'm trying really hard to lose weight or maintain my weight loss. So they recommend 300 minutes a week. That sounds, I know, that sounds like a lot. But it's really 60 minutes, 5 days a week. Okay, so again, that is a lot. You could always break it up into 2 30-minute sessions. If you're somebody who has lost weight or you're trying to maintain weight, you do have to put a little bit more effort of movement in there, because a lot of our actual daily life is not as not geared towards movement. So that's why we need to actually do that to keep our metabolism going. So there are 5 different types of fitness training for your best overall health and optimal function. I say this because a lot of times, and which is, by the way, if you're starting a workout program, it's important. Even if you have one aspect of these, that's great to start. But eventually you're going to want to build in these areas. I'm going to talk a lot today about strength and resistance training, as well as cardiorespiratory or aerobic training. And I am going to do another one on balance training, coordination, agility, flexibility, and mobility that has a lot to do with injury prevention and longevity. So that's a whole nother lunch and learn on its own, because there was so much information around that. So I'm going to stick to the top few, because again, we're talking about the foundations and the basics. But again, this is for optimal function that you would choose all of those. And the truth is, all aspects of fitness are important. But by incorporating a little bit of each of these, you're going to gain the most function from your movement and feel the best. So strength training or resistance training, a lot of people have different interpretations of what that is. This is defined as strength resistance training involves the performance of physical exercise, which are designed to improve strength and endurance. It is often associated with the use of weights or dumbbells, barbells, medicine balls, all kinds of different modalities. And it also increases a variety of training techniques such as calisthenics, isometrics, and plyometrics. So you could use your own body weight and still gain a lot of strength and resistance benefit, okay? One of the things that I say to people when they first start a program is just use your own body weight, because you'd be surprised at how much it is just to control that. And when you're going through range of motion exercises, you're getting a lot of movement and you are actually gaining a lot of resistance. So for instance, if you're doing a squat and you're going down and up in your squat, down and up, you have to control all that weight. So you're already gaining strength from that movement because you have to control all those muscles. And so you don't need weight to start. Lower abdominal fat is one of the things I like best about the concept behind resistance training. And lower abdominal fat is hard to control, but it's so important because of the fat around, the visceral fat around the organs. And resistance training is really good at reducing that. It's interesting that when people incorporate strength training into their exercise routine, they not only burn calories, but they increase lean muscle mass, which stimulates the metabolism. Muscle mass is a major factor in determining basal metabolic rate, or the number of calories the body burns per day to sustain physiologic functions. Okay, like literally that is just like your breathing, your cell turnover in your body, very basic things, but it does increase your basic metabolic rate just by having more muscle on your body. This is a really good, I should have printed this article out as well, but this study is the Journal of Aging and Physical Activity. Older adults, okay, so I'm not talking about young people, I'm talking about older adults, significantly improve their total body muscle after just 16-hour long resistant training workouts, which is essentially was 4 workouts a week over 4 months, and they significantly changed their overall muscle strength. So it's not something that you need to do for years. It's just staying committed for a period of time. You can see that change. And this is for older adults. Remember, if younger adults, this happens faster. Okay?
What do you
What's older?
That's good.
So this study, the older is over 50, but that, I know. But you know what? Hey, let's face it, like it still benefits. That's why we have to remember that, I'm almost there myself. I love this visual, and I love the information behind this visual because I think it really helps because so many people are so caught up in the concept of weight. Remember that muscle versus fat is very different. It weighs the same. So on the scale, that pound is the exact same. However, a pound of muscle is denser than fat, and it takes up much less space. Muscle is also much more vascular than fat, okay? What that means is it helps transport blood supply through the body, and that extra work burns far more calories than the same pound of fat. You can see it in this picture right here that 5 pounds of fat burns 20 calories a day. 1 pound of fat burns, 5 pounds of fat burns, 1 pound of fat burns 5 calories. 5 pounds of muscle burns 250 calories a day, and 1 pound of muscle burns 50 calories a day. So a lot of times the big thing people do is like, well, you know what, it's the same weight on the scale. Like it doesn't matter. I was exercising and then I stopped exercising, but my weight didn't change. Probably that happened. And I think when you see the fact that that happened and you feel the difference in your body, it's a real thing. Because your body shape changes. When you're strength training and you're building muscle, you're actually able, you might even, which is hard for people, you might not lose a lot of weight in the beginning, but what you might see is a significant body change. And really, it's a lot more important. It's a lot more important than what the weight says on the scale. So your benefits of strength training, even beyond what some of those other benefits were when we first looked at that, lower abdominal fat, better cardiovascular health. Yes, I say cardiovascular health from strength training. Controlled blood sugar levels, reduced cancer risk, lowered risk of injury, which is also a really important component that we'll talk about later too. Strengthened mental health, improved flexibility, elevated body image, as we talked about earlier too, osteoporosis prevention and management. Remember, boost brain health and a longer lifespan. Again, that's even a little bit beyond just what we saw in the beginning, which is movement. So first we looked at was activity. Just by adding activity into your day, you added all those other health benefits, and now you just added all of these extra, to the benefits of strength training. So when you see this, does it make you want to do some strength training? You want to increase? Yes, I bet you do. All right, so cardiorespiratory fitness. Oh, by the way, real quickly, anybody currently doing strength training right now? Yes. I have a question for you. Did you previously do strength training before? How long have you been doing it?
Since January.
Okay, so what are the differences you've seen?
Like you mentioned, I did not lose much weight, but I lost a lot of inches. My actual body composition changed. I was stronger. lots more energy. I mean, that was the biggest change that I was looking for.
Yeah.
But I keep going with it because I want to keep picking up my son as he gets bigger. So
Well, you know what? And that's so funny that you say that because it helps us function better, right? That was another one. I didn't actually hit that. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Kim, because it does. We don't realize it, but by having a little more strength, it's a little easier to get through our day because we actually can carry things like our son or, you know, whatever it may be, just a little easier because we have more muscle strength to do that. We don't think, oh my goodness, I need help because that's too much for me, right? So that's another big benefit that I didn't get to mention. So thank you for sharing that. And one of the other things I was going to say, I think, Cheyenne, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you want to say about strength
Oh,
training?
no, I wasn't gonna say anything. You said raise your hand.
She's like, I did my part already. So we're going to jump into cardiorespiratory fitness, but I was really pushing the concept of strength training, mainly because I think years ago, 1960s, right? Probably early 1970s. I keep saying 60s. Actually, Arnold Schwarzenegger came out in the 1970s as like hardcore strength training. By the way, he's still doing it, which is amazing. But what's crazy about it is he brought this whole new concept beyond bodybuilding, which is a whole other thing that I'm not talking about today. I have not that I'm against bodybuilding, I'm just not into bodybuilding, okay, if that makes any sense. I think that's a great component. If you're into it, that's wonderful. What I'm saying is that my whole focus is on health and fitness being a part of your overall well-being and fitness, and bodybuilding is a different art. It's a whole other concept. And it's very much geared towards your physical appearance. And my goal is about to take away from that, think about what's underneath. And if you wore your organs on your outside, you'd be a lot more interested in your health and fitness, believe me. But cardiorespiratory fitness. So this refers to the ability of the circulatory and respiratory systems to supply oxygen to skeletal muscles during sustained physical activity. The primary measure of CRF, or cardiorespiratory fitness, is VO2 max. I am not going to get into all the science behind this because there is a lot of science behind this. You would literally fall asleep. But what's interesting is what it basically does is it allows the more cardio fit you are, or cardiorespiratory fit, what happens is you're able to pump more blood for every stroke volume, okay, or every stroke of the heart, right? Every stroke, every time you pump that blood through the arteries and then out through the vein, you're getting more blood pumped through with every stroke because you have a more efficient heart through cardiorespiratory fitness, okay? So if you think about it, your heart has to work less hard. And don't we want that? Because the number one morbidity rate for men and women today still is heart. It's still heart attack. And it's not anything to do with the heart. So even though there's all these cancers today, and we know all these other areas of illness that we have, the number one reason why the death rate is so high for both men and women, the number one reason is cardiovascular health. And isn't that interesting that hasn't changed? That no matter all the other things that we've learned about and other things that have come out and that we found out about our health, that's still literally the number one killer. Now, this is the one that I wanted to talk to you about that you have out in front of you. The reason why I love this article is because one of the main reasons why people will start working with me and they'll say, you know what, I'm not seeing the changes that I want to see physically. I don't think this is working for me, so I no longer want to exercise, okay? And it's interesting because a lot of times they don't necessarily see it on the outside. It takes time. It really takes time. It takes a lot of commitment. And by the way, it's not just about exercise, it's also what we eat. We all know that. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not here to talk about nutrition. I will say that I am currently working on a certification for nutrition coaching, and it's fascinating information, but I'm not there yet. I am focusing right now on exercise and fitness, and regardless of your weight, that actually this is so that people would typically lower their risks of heart disease and premature death far more by gaining fitness than by dropping weight. This article supports that. It was actually a recent article. It was in the New York Times in September of 2021. They did a study for a period of time, both men and women. It was a really interesting study. And it showed that there's a lot of skinny fat people out there in this world. And so people are so concerned about being thin that they don't realize that they're not healthy just by being thin. That actually that is not a measure of health. A measure of health is what you're doing for your body and how you're treating your body, and exercise is really the best way to determine your overall health versus fitness. And it's been a motivation for too long, and I'm really, it's too important to me that we kind of shift the focus and shift the gear outside of fitness and really about fitness. So going back to fitness, there's two types of fitness. There's aerobic and anaerobic. I touched on this a little bit earlier. Aerobic cardiovascular health is activity with large amounts of oxygen are required continually for an extended period of time. Again, I'm going to break this down really simply. This could get into the ATP cycle and the Krebs cycle and the ATP drop and release and what all that good stuff. But again, very scientific. But I'm going to stick to the focus here that if you're able to maintain that movement for more than 30 seconds and then a period of time where you're building your stamina and your endurance and your heart health, you're actually working aerobically. And aerobic workouts can be done with strength training. You don't necessarily have to just be doing these running, biking, swimming. It's actually a lot of circuit training will offer aerobic training, a way of maintaining your heart rate. You could do that as well. Anaerobic training is something different, and that's a lot of what we talked about with what Cheyenne was showing you with those really high intensity exercises. They're actually anaerobic. So you really can't exert more than 30 seconds for any of those movements. If you can, what you'll notice is that progression will have to drop down your performance level. So if you are doing a clean and press with a really high level weight, you will max out before you get to that, or around that 30-second mark before you get beyond that. Because what will happen is you will go into an aerobic effort, and the aerobic effort will make your body drop back. Yes.
So if you're really out of shape, could your exercise be anaerobic even though it probably should be aerobic?
Okay, so interesting that you asked that question. Do you know before you start exercising, like a run or even like a power walk of any kind, you know how you're starting to you're catching your breath, and it's actually a little bit hard in the beginning. It's like that first few seconds, almost minute, where you're like, okay, I'm trying to get into motion here. That's anaerobic. So it's basically the body kind of setting itself up. And so if you're out of shape, sometimes that lasts longer, but what will still happen is you'll still spike and drop, because you won't be able to maintain it because your body is anaerobic. And what will happen is you're going to have to catch your breath because it's working without oxygen. So that's the difference too in that system. And so think of it as, my favorite one on this is sprinting on the track. I think it kind of gives me the best concept of what that feels like. You can't sprint for long. I mean, you do see people that after they train and they build their endurance up, what will happen is though, you'll notice that even a phenomenal runner, they're able to stay at a really fast, high pace. Their pace will kind of shift while they're going back and forth between anaerobic and aerobic, because they can't maintain it. So there's two ways of evaluating the way that we're working. And one of my favorites, I think this is the easiest, it's a subjective measure, but I feel like it's the easiest to interpret. Sometimes we don't have to go into mathematical equations. We can actually just go by the rate of perceived exertion. And a simplified rate of perceived exertion scale is just a 1 to 10. How are you feeling? 1, you're at rest. 10, maximal effort, you're on the floor. All right, you're beyond how hard you've worked. Okay, you cannot do any more. So where you want to be is somewhere between that 5 and 10, and really 6 and 9. I like to say, or 7, 8, right in that sweet spot. That's when you're actually saying, okay, I'm feeling really good. You've been to the doctor before, and they've said to you, what's your pain level, right? And sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, it's a 15, right? It's off the charts. This is the same thing. You're never going to say on a rate of perceived exertion that you're a 15, because if you are, you're passed out on the floor somewhere. So you'll never be able to speak about it. But you will say that I'm at a 9. I don't think I can go any farther. And that's where you actually want to be that in that understanding, that subjective measurement, where you want to stay again back into that spot between the 5 and Your maximum target heart rate, this is an objective measurement because it is, you can actually calculate it. We've been using this 220 minus your age times the intensity desired for a long time. We've used this number, but we found out that it has a pretty large error, room for error. So the problem is, like, we could still use it, but you have to give yourself a little bit of margin for error in that number. So we came up with a new form, and actually this was like studied over years, last 10 years, and they came up with this number instead. And this is that 208.7, and I actually did this myself, and I found out that that number was so much better. I have a watch, an Apple Watch, so it pretty much will tell me where I'm at, and what my level is all the time, and I'm able to see that, like, at that range, I actually am a better fit. And the 220 minus my age time intensity is off a bit. But again, it's not awful either, and especially if you're just starting out, it's an easy one to remember. So your cardiorespiratory fitness has target heart rate zones. And I have to say, even though we're focusing on cardiorespiratory fitness, this actually does fall, if you remember going backwards on the strength and the strength workout, strength training and resistance training, we actually could fall into these zones as well for strength training. It's not just cardiorespiratory. But zone 1 is that 65 to 75%. But once you get to the point where you're able to kind of, as long as you have no health issues, you should be able to be at that point. And if you're above that for 30 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week, you can then jump to zone 2. When you're in zone 2, you're going to work at that until you feel like you're actually comfortable in zone 2, and then you'll move to zone 3, which is your maximum of 86 to 95%. I know that some of you, I was talking to Virginia, and Virginia actually has a Peloton, and they often will tell you to get into that zone 3 a lot. That's a great level of great intensity. It's hard. Not everybody can sustain that. It's probably something that you're going to want to go back and forth between, particularly when you're just, as it says, you want to make sure you build your heart rate up to make sure you can handle that. So I'm going to talk about these barriers, but I'm going to ask you quickly. So what do you think is your number one reason why you don't exercise regularly, or if you do exercise regularly, why you don't go longer than, I should say, how do I want to say that? Let me start with barriers. Does anybody else here feel like they have, right now they're thinking, I don't exercise regularly, and what's your reasoning? Does anybody want to offer? Lillian?
I mean, actually, for me, it's friend beats. I mean, I can't get out of here, and I always have great intentions, and it's just time.
Yeah.
Where it's, I meant to leave at 5, and here it is 7:30, I'm still here. So that's, my biggest issue. And I want to sort of get to the point where I stop making excuses, and if it is 9:30 at night, still do something.
Yeah, that's true. That is hard. Working long hours does make it really challenging. And I would suggest, if there's any way of even breaking it up, then maybe that's something that you could do during the day, where before you leave for work in the morning, if you get 10 minutes in. And I mean, I could even, put together a 10-minute workout routine to do at home. So it's 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then at lunchtime, 10-minute walk around the perimeter. And then at night, and it's just go outside and walk in your neighborhood, 10 minutes. So if you could get to the point where you're fitting 10 minutes, and each increment, you'll see a difference in how you feel during those times of your day too. So you might hit that afternoon slump where you might come out of it, and then when you get home at night and you're just feeling a little restless from working for a long time, getting that extra 10 minutes might make a difference for you too. And the concept of 10 minutes is so much easier to overcome than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You might think you don't have time for 30 minutes, but you have time for 10.
Yes.
And then how about equipment? A lot of people say to me, I don't have equipment. I don't have anything to work out with. I don't belong to a gym. So I always say begin with your own body weight. And then you can always add dumbbells to increase intensity and variety along the way. But you can actually just think about it like that, where, and I always say the best way to start a workout program is to start walking. As you heard me say earlier, I really do emphasize strength training. And there are some basic strength training exercises that you can do that to incorporate with walking, but those two, and again, using your own body weight, those two together are the best way to start. The next one is space. People always say, I don't have room. I don't know where to do it. And I always say, all you literally need is like the size of a mat in your, so that could be in a bedroom, that could be move the coffee table out. It could be pretty much any room, maybe a guest room or whatever, an office space, and then you could use that space there too. And then our biggest barrier that most people will tell me is it's just motivation. I don't know how to get motivated. I mean, I know why I should do it. I understand how important it is. I actually really have the desire to do it. I want it to do this. I want to commit to this, but I don't know how to get the motivation. And I would say this is probably the biggest challenge that people come to me and say that they struggle. So the one thing I would always say is to, begin making a daily commitment is to have some kind of accountability partner. And that could be, that could be a person, right? Or a chart or something, but it could be somebody that you live with, somebody that you work with. It could be a sibling or a child or a spouse or someone that you just have, check in with. You know what? Just remind me this week, like I'm going to tell you, do you want to share?
My friend actually trained her dog. Every time she got up to work out, gave her a treat. So now in the morning, 5 o'clock, you're not down here with your workout equipment, she'll go up and wake her up.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
You a pet too, even if you live alone and just have a pet.
Okay.
Cats I know too are very schedule oriented.
Yeah.
Yes, that's phenomenal. I have not heard of that one yet. Although my dog is, she's committed to when she eats. So I probably think, I could see how a treat would work. That's fantastic. I also said to people, sometimes if you see a chart and you write it down and you say, okay, so for this month, I only got 6 days in, okay. And then the next month you got 12 days in, and it just gives you a little bit of extra motivation. Like, I did better this month than I did last month. And so some people are very visual that way, or again, it's a connection. But one of the big things I say is to always think about how you feel after you exercise. Write that word down. And it literally could be simple. It could say, I feel great today. It could say that I have better mobility. It could say that I feel happier, less anxious, just inspired, whatever the word may be. But every time you exercise, write down that word, whatever that word, the first word that comes to your mind. And you'll see that will create a sense of positive reinforcement because you know how good it makes you feel. You want to feel that way again. So what will happen is that response will create that habit, and that will make it easier for you to stick with because you've actually thought about over and over again how much it's made you feel all these ways. And why would you avoid it if it's going to make you feel like that, right? So does anybody have any questions? Are you all pumped, ready to work out? Don't you wish we could go do that right now? Like, I actually feel like we should. But that would be like the perfect tie-in, is if now we had like a little space to work out. But I was sharing a little bit of that with you today as well because I am going to be offering one-on-one fitness programming for every one of you or any person that you know here that's an employee at Fred Beans. And what we're going to do is kind of start wherever you're at. And you might be somebody who's working out. And you might say, you know what, but I want this instead. So it could be somebody who's never worked out before or somebody who has, a whole new goal in mind that they want to achieve. Maybe it's to run your first 5K or even walk your first 5K. Or maybe it's that I just want to have more mobility. My back and hips are bothering me. I mean, it could be any one of those things. But if you have any interest in that, please let me know. If you know an employee that you've talked to that is sharing with you that they're frustrated and not getting the results that they want either from their own workout or they just feel like they need the motivation, please have them reach out to me. I'm very interested in trying to improve overall wellness for each one of us. And I really believe a big part of it starts with exercise. One of the things I want to finish with, every one of our lunch and learns, many of you have come to many of them, or all of them. And they often say the first thing you could do to reduce your risk of cancer, high blood pressure, different types of, mental health issues, whatever, every one of them says exercise, right? So it's really an important part. I mean, we really have to find a way to commit to that because it does help every aspect of our life. And if you think about it like that, it becomes less overwhelming and it's life-giving, right? And it does increase your longevity. It actually makes you feel more productive while you're at work. I mean, heck, you might get out an hour earlier, Lillian, because you'll be like working so hard and so fast. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it's surprisingly enough, it might end up kind of, playing into the way you work here, but also how you function outside of here. But thank you so much for joining me here today. Thanks for coming. If you have any questions or you want to email me, please do. I'm really open to feedback. This is actually the first time I've put this presentation on. So if you think there's areas of tweaking that you think would help you or help the next person listening to it, I would really appreciate your feedback. All right? Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Andrew, you got one question? I just had a thought. So listening to that.